Good morning, class. Welcome to the 2022 presentation or contact class for Agricultural Education 1, BS AGE22. My name is Eric Ukule, and I'll be your tutor for this module. And should there be anything that needs clarity, whether in relation to this presentation or the whole module or the module as a whole, I can be contacted by a cell phone on 081 2206 900 or via email at ericukule@gmail.com, and this can be done during those hours of between 6 and 8 p.m. So once again, I'm saying welcome to Agricultural Education 1. I wish for you guys to be hardworking, dedicated, and self-driven students during the course of this module. Okay, so this presentation will cover the subject content in brief and also some general guidelines that I would want everyone to keep in mind as they prepare for their 2022 Agricultural Education 1 examination. Okay, so I'll be discussing some of the content from your study guide in order to help you to prepare for the coming examination. Okay, by now, when you get this presentation, you would have had an idea of what is going on in the subject, as you would have completed an assignment. Okay, so please note that I will not be able to give attention to the whole content. So should you have any questions, please do contact me as per the contact details provided on the second slide. So the following presentation will highlight some important aspects as well as some units of this module. And you can use the study guide to prepare for the examination together with this presentation. Okay, so in the first unit, how does agriculture provide food and income to the family? Okay, first of all, we'll start off by defining what agriculture is. So it is the process of utilizing inputs and turning these into useful products. And these inputs are soil, fertilizer, seed, grass, fodder, water, animals, as well as favorable climatic conditions. Okay, and in Namibia, we do practice agriculture on 3 scales, which is the small-scale farming, which is mostly done for subsistence reasons or in a communal farming setup. We also have medium-scale farming, and this is mostly dominated by upcoming commercial farmers, so it's like a transition stage. And then the last scale is the large-scale farming, which is purely commercial. Okay. So when it comes to commercial farming and communal farming, there are a number of differences between the two, and these differences are outlined clearly in your study guide from page 3 to 5, so you guys ensure that you go through. Okay, but in short, when it comes to commercial farming, the farmer would most likely own the land, whereas in a communal setup, the land belongs to the community. And for commercial farming, as it says in the name, the farm is mostly the farm for commercial purposes, whereas for communal farming, they engage in subsistence farming. Okay, so commercial farming, because the people are trying to make some money, so they make use of very scientific, specialized, and sophisticated farming technologies so that they maximize their income. Okay, but when it comes to communal farming, this is done on a small scale. Okay, commercial farming is based on mechanization, whereas in a communal farming setup, we are still using traditional farming activities or methods. Okay, so, and for commercial farmers, they usually have farm produce, post-harvest storage, as well as processing facilities, whereas you would find that communal farmers have very little to no infrastructure. Okay, so under agriculture, once we have produced, okay, so how do we ensure that at least we have this food sometime way after the harvesting season? Then that comes the issue of food preservation, okay, whose objective is for food to keep its quality for a reasonable length of time and this can be done by reducing the water content to about 12%, so that bacteria and other microorganisms find it difficult to survive or they become less active. Okay, but this 12% water content is nothing universal, so it depends on the type of food that is being preserved, and you'll find that mostly if it comes to grains, they will be kept under those conditions. Okay, so food preservation at the household level can be performed in a number of simple ways. It can be done, let's say for instance, milk through fermentation. However, I would require you guys to read in your study guide on page 5 and understand the different ways by which food can be preserved at a household level. Excuse me. Okay, so we are still in the first unit, how agriculture provides food and income to the family. And this is where also it's prescribed as to the aims for the upper primary elementary agriculture in Namibia. Why are we doing this? Okay, so the reason to go through the agriculture syllabus is to provide basic scientific background for our learners with the hope of producing the much needed scientists and agriculturalists for the country, so that we can work towards that goal of food security. Okay? So another reason or another aim is to lay the foundation for the development of human resources as a basis for further studies, occupation, as well as self-employment. Okay, however, in these slides, I've only included 2 of the aims why we do agriculture. However, it's also required for you to go to your study guide and then go to page 8 until 9 and read up on all of the aims, okay, for the agriculture syllabus, or what the agriculture syllabus aims to do. Okay, so they are outlined clearly and in more detail on pages 8 to 9 of your study guide. Okay, so we cannot talk about agriculture, food production without addressing the issue of food security and what it is. Okay, so basically food security is the adequate availability of food to all individuals in space and time within a particular country, and the assurance that every child has a right to basic nutrition and they get that nutrition. Okay? So in Namibia, food security is threatened by several risk factors. This includes natural attributes, inputs availability and affordability, land tenure and land size holdings, investment and appropriate technology, climate change, as well as land degradation. However, you as the student, you need to study these things in detail, all these risk factors. So on page 14 until page 16 of your study guide, they are discussed in more detail. So make sure to visit those pages. Okay, so then Unit 2, Economic Importance of Agriculture and Environmental Problems in Agriculture. Okay, so agriculture as a whole has the capability to generate an income for the farmers. Okay, so when the farmer produces agricultural produce beyond their own consumption, so meaning they have surplus, they are involved in agribusiness, which is the sale of agricultural products. Okay, so in order to succeed, you as a farmer should emulate the working habits of other successful entrepreneurs. Okay? So if you are going to be involved in agribusiness, then you need to emulate the working habits of successful entrepreneurs, and some of these habits include such as that farmers should not over and underprice their agricultural commodities. So you should do market research, what is the trend, and what is the average price. Then you price your commodities accordingly so that you don't end up cheating the consumer or cheating yourself if you underprice your products. Okay, so another habit is that greediness or the get-rich-quick mentality is not progressive. So we should avoid this. Okay, so you must understand, also you as a farmer, you must be able to understand the profit equation very clearly, because it is crucial to your enterprise. Okay, so however, this is just a brief. Okay, so in your study guide on pages 22 to 23, you would find that these habits are discussed in more detail, and I urge you to visit those pages. Okay, so what are some of the challenges that one might face in agriculture? Okay, so we have several challenges such as limited access to markets, climate change, which is now a global problem, limited opportunities and platforms for the poor and marginalized farmers, inadequate safety nets and food emergency management systems. So there are also others, and you are urged to familiarize yourself with those ones. In your study guide, pages 23 to 25, they are outlined and discussed in more details. So do make sure to visit those pages. So going on with the economic importance of agriculture as well as some of the environmental problems that we encounter, there is also the issue of soil erosion on agricultural land. Okay, so soil erosion is defined as the removal of the topsoil, which has more nutrients for plants. Okay, so there are several types of soil erosions, and each type is described or named depending on the causative agent. Okay, so you would find that some erosion is caused as a result of wind, so it's named as such based on the causative agent. And we have three major types of soil erosion, which are water erosion, wind erosion, as well as tillage erosion. And these are discussed more in details on pages 25 to 26 of your study guide. Okay, so how does now soil erosion affect crop as well as animal production? Okay, so we are saying soil erosion does affect both crops as well as animal production because it leads to losses of dissolved nutrients, and as a result it contributes to the decline in soil fertility and subsequently leads to poor crop and animal production. Okay, so when the topsoil is removed, the ground becomes unproductive and crop yields would decline. So read more on this on page 27 of your study guide as well. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which is the importance of soil in plant growth. Okay, so what are some of the soil characteristics, or how do we characterize the different types of soil that we encounter? Okay, so it can be done based on the color of the soil, based on its texture. Okay, how does it feel? Okay, or the feel of the soil grains, and this sense of feeling is defined by the different proportions of sand, silt, as well as clay particles. Okay, and then the last way of characterizing a soil will be based on its structure, which refers to the appearance of the aggregated soil particles. Okay. And when it comes to soil color, it's mainly influenced by two factors, which is the mineral matter as well as organic matter. Okay, based on those two factors, the color of our soil can be influenced. Okay, so when it comes to soil color, it can tell us a few details about some properties of that particular soil. Okay, so it has been studied that when dark colors or dark colored soils are encountered, so that would mean that near the surface indicates high organic matter, and high organic matter is associated with better drainage, good structure, and nutrient levels. However, it should also be noted that not all dark soils are well drained, and this we have observed, or we might have observed when it comes to clay soil. You find that it's darker, but does not necessarily have good drainage. Okay, and then when you encounter reds and orange colored soils, so in subsoils it indicates iron oxide in aerobic condition, and this is an indication of good drainage, low leaching, and low leaching. So with sufficient water, these soils are generally fertile. Okay, so red and orange colored soils are generally fertile when sufficient water is availed. Okay, then you find dull yellow and mottles. So this means that there is seasonal waterlogging causing anaerobic conditions and possibly high levels of lime. Okay, then you would find pale colors and white colored soils. So this is an indication of low organic matter and poor fertility. Okay, so at the surface, these soils reflect heat. They are also slow to warm and slow to cool down. Okay, and if they are found over clay, it may indicate a packed water table for part of the year with high leaching due to waterlogging, and it may also be due to large amounts of calcium carbonate or minerals. Okay, so based on the color of the soil, these are some of the observations that have been made and noted. Continuing, so you'd find that plants will grow differently in soils collected from different areas. And one of the reasons for this phenomena is that plants grow differently in soils from different areas because of their nutrient requirements. So different plants have different nutrient requirements, and you'd find that different soils would also have different amounts of nutrients. Okay? So this and some other reasons are well explained in your study guide on page 40. So please do get familiar with those reasons on page 40 of your study guide. Okay. So now how do we, still on the topic of the soil, how do we improve soil fertility? By adding manure. Okay, so this is one of the traditional ways of improving soil fertility. So we add manure. Okay, so to improve the soil fertility, one can use aged manure, and some of the advantages of using aged manure are that the carbon to nitrogen ratio decreases during aging, and this can be beneficial for your plants, as well as harmful substances that are released in the first stage of decomposition are removed during the aging period. Okay, so another advantage is that wheat seeds are decomposed or they lose their germination power. Okay, so once again, you are asked to read up more on this on page 44 of your Agricultural Education 1 study guide. Still on the topic of soil, importance of soil in plant growth, below are some of the important nutrients that are required by plants. Okay. For them to thrive, they require several nutrients. And these are divided into two groups. So we have macronutrients or major nutrients, and then the other group is that of micronutrients or minor nutrients. With the difference being that with macronutrients, these are required in higher concentrations. Okay, so these are required by plants in higher concentrations, or they are found in higher concentrations in plant tissues. And this includes nutrients such as carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, potassium, and others as described or are detailed on page 46 to 48 of your study guide. Okay, whereas now micronutrients, these are required in much lower concentrations, and they are also found in lower concentrations in the tissues of the plants. So this includes things such as copper, iron, zinc, and others. Okay, so these groups of plant nutrients are discussed further in your study manual, and it is important that you read up on them and develop the ability to note the differences between these two groups. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which speaks about why water and light are essential for plant growth. Okay, so water, it's very important to plant growth, and there's also that saying that water is life. We are dependent on water for many things. And when it comes to farming, if you have to farm with plants, they need water for growth, strength, thermostat, food, nutrients, as well as for roads. Okay, so in your study guide on pages 62 and 63, these are described in more details, okay, of how plants use water to carry out these activities that are listed in this slide. They are discussed more in detail on page 62 until 63 of your study guide. So please do familiarize yourself with those details. Okay, so we are saying water is life. So, and it is one of those valuable resources. And as such, it requires us to preserve water. Not only that it's expensive, it's also scarce for much periods of much of the time throughout the year, especially given our Namibian weather as well as climate. Okay, so we can preserve water by watering or irrigating plants early in the morning or late in the evening. Okay, when it's not too hot and the water simply just evaporates. Okay, so we should water our plants either in the morning or in the late evening. Okay, so it can also be preserved through rainwater harvesting. Okay, so there are also other methods of water preservation. Okay, and the descriptions of those other methods as well as the two that are listed in this slide are discussed more in detail on page 64 until 65 of your study guide. So please do read up on them. So when it comes to water, now we have preserved water. Okay, what else can you do to earn an income from that water that you have collected? Maybe you practiced rainwater harvesting. Okay, so you as a farmer, you can also make use of the available water to generate some income. Okay, so you can engage in activities such as gardening with cash crops, such as tomatoes, green peppers, onions, etc. Okay, so these cash crops have high farm, or you can also farm with high turnover animals such as poultry. You can also grow fodder. You can also engage in other economic activities. Okay, but these are discussed more on page 67 of your study guide. So once again, please do visit that page. So then you can brush up on ways that you as a farmer can earn income from the water that you have collected or harvested. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which has to do with the damage caused by diseases and pests on plants. Okay, so most plant diseases, they are caused by the following biological agents. Okay, so we have plant diseases that are caused by bacteria, we have those that are caused by fungi, viruses, as well as nematodes. Okay, so these are the main causative biological agents, okay, that lead to the occurrence of plant diseases. So in your study guide, these are described more in detail. So once again, you should go to your study guide and read up on what a bacteria is, what is a fungi, what is a virus, and how do they lead to plant diseases, and what plant diseases are caused by bacteria, for example. All these details are outlined in your study guide. So please do make sure to go through them. Okay, so once we are while we are on the topic of diseases and pests, how do we now control this without harming the environment? Okay, so over the years, people have been trying to find solutions to do away with those harmful chemicals, some harmful pesticides or herbicides, etc. Okay, so how do we control now pests without harming the environment? So this can be done by feeding plants with high quality organic fertilizers. Okay, so this is the best preventive measure against pests. Okay, so the best way to control diseases is also to use organic or less harmful chemical remedies. However, this section on how one can control pests and diseases without harming the environment is discussed in more details in your study guide, and this is done on page 82. please, once again, I urge you to go to that page and familiarize yourself with how you can control pests and diseases without causing harm to your environment. Okay, moving on to the next unit. It has to do with the effect of weeds on plant growth. Okay, so weeds are plants that grow where they are not wanted. Okay, so they are not valued where they are grown, and they usually grow vigorously. Okay, so these are plants. So when you are asked to describe what a weed is, it's a plant that grows where it's not wanted or where it's not valued. And weeds usually grow at a vigorous rate compared to your desired crops or plants. Okay, so they tend to overgrow and choke out the desired plants, because now they have to compete with your desired plants for water, for light, and nutrients. Okay, so we should therefore then remove weeds from among valuable plants, because they can be harmful to mankind by causing skin irritations, such as now this is caused by weeds such as poison ivy. They can cause hay fever. They can also harbor pests such as rodents, ticks, and insects. Okay, so this discussion on why we should remove weeds from among valuable plants continues to the next slide. Okay, so they are not only harmful to humans, they can also be harmful to desired plants by releasing toxins in the soil which inhibit the growth of desirable plants. Okay, they can be harmful by contaminating the product at harvest. They compete for water, nutrients, light, and space with your desirable plants. They can also harbor pests, insects, mites, vertebrates, or plant diseases, or they can act as plant disease agents. Okay, so now we know that weeds can be harmful to humans and plants. And lastly, they can also be harmful to grazing animals. Okay, they can also be pests in the water. Okay, so how weeds harm mankind and desirable plants is highlighted in this slide as well as in the previous one. So please, once again, do consult your study guide and read up on how weeds can harm grazing animals and how they may become pests in water. And these details are outlined on page 99 of your Agricultural Education 1 study guide. Okay, continuing with the effect of weeds on plant growth. Okay, so there are some safety measures that one must undertake when working in the fields. Okay, so whether you are applying some pesticides, whatever you are doing in the fields. So many chemical accidents results from careless practices or ignorance. Okay, so you get your pesticide, you don't read the instructions, you just start spraying. Okay, so carelessness as well as ignorance have resulted in many of the chemical accidents that are reported on farms. Okay, so to safeguard your safety, that of other people as well as the environment, the following key points should be considered and remembered when applying toxic materials in the fields. The first one is to learn proper safety precautions. Okay, so learn proper safety precautions for before, during, and after pesticide application. Very important. Okay, so you also need to understand the importance of clean up measures. Should there be a spill, how do you clean it up? You also need to understand that. Okay, so you also need to understand the need for personal protective equipment or PPE. Okay, so these are not the only safety precautions that one should consider. There are several others, and they are outlined on pages 101 to 102 of your study guide. So please, once again, I urge you to familiarize yourself with those. How do you keep yourself, other workers, as well as your environment safe during, before, and after pesticide application. So those details are given on pages 101 and 102 of your study guide. Okay, so when it comes to controlling weeds, there are several costs that are involved. Okay, so the key to effective and quick weed control is to eradicate these weeds while they are still small, so that the cost is also low. So you don't give them a chance to grow. So once they start coming up, then you immediately deal with them. So this will save you money. Okay, so it will lead to lower costs of weed control. Okay, so when it comes to controlling weeds, the major costs involved are labor costs. Okay, you need people to be in the fields weeding. So labor costs, the cost of buying equipment of machinery, in case you are not a labor-intensive enterprise. Also the cost of herbicides. Okay, so these are the three major costs that are involved in weed control. Labor costs, cost of buying equipment or machinery, as well as the cost of herbicides. Okay, so it's also important that you study the cost involved in controlling weeds in detail, as outlined in your study guide on page 102. Okay, so this is just a brief overview, okay, of the major costs that are involved, but the details are given on page 102 of your study guide. Okay, so moving on to the next unit, which has to do with how one needs to take care of farm animals. Okay, so we start off with the importance of caring for farm animals. Okay, so for maximum productivity in terms of meat, milk, eggs, or any other commodity that we obtain from animals, it is important to have happy animals. Okay? So animal welfare it's always a good thing to practice animal welfare, because you need to have happy animals so that you get maximum animal productivity. Okay, so animals are at their maximum health and contentedness are very profitable. So those animals that are at their maximum health and contentedness are very profitable, and we should move away from the habit of managing our livestock farms from a physical standpoint, but from the animal welfare point. Instead of just having your farm, you have your goats there, but your sole focus is on generating income only. So you don't care about what happens to your animals as long as they are able to bring you some money. We should do away with that and move towards animal welfare. Okay, so if we take good care of those animals, they will be profitable, and as a result, they will be able to take care of our profit needs. Okay. So how should you, if you are a farmer, how do you look after your animals then? Okay, so as a farmer, you should try to look after animals bearing in mind the 5 freedoms that animals are entitled to. Okay, animals are entitled to 5 freedoms, and these are outlined in your study guide on pages 110 to 111. Okay, so in order for farmers to give their animals the best welfare, they need to pay attention to the following areas. Okay, so facility design or housing for their animals, animal health, how they handle and train their animals. Is it done in a humane way, or are they abusing their animals? Okay, so feed and water. Okay, are your animals getting adequate feed? Do they have access to clean drinking water? Okay, so all these areas should be paid attention to. And lastly is the area of experimentation or research. Okay, is the research that you are conducting done in an ethical manner, or does it involve some sort of animal cruelty? Okay, so you should pay attention to those areas if you want to give your animals the best welfare. Okay, so the above areas are discussed in detail in your study guide on page 110 to 111. So you need to study and understand them very well. Okay, so once again, another important thing to note is that you need to read up on why a farmer needs to feed his or her animals regularly, no matter the costs involved. Okay, so you as a farmer, you need to feed the animals on a regular basis, regardless of the cost involved. You can't say now the feed is too expensive, you won't feed the animals. You must make a plan. Okay, so you guys also need to read up on that. Okay, so continuing with how one might take care of farm animals. Okay, so a description of a business that can be done with animal feed. Okay, so you can make hay and sell it to farmers during the dry season. We recently had a drought, so you can make money that way. Making silage and selling it to farmers during the dry season, especially dairy farmers. Treating crop residues and dry grass or hay with feed-grade urea, fertilizers, and sell to farmers, especially beef farmers. Okay. Though it is complicated, one can formulate feeds for various animal types with minimum processing, bagging, then you bag them and sell. One can also prepare the feeds in any method above and feed his or her own animals so that the animals produce more milk, meat, or eggs, and this you can sell to generate an income. Okay, so continuing with how to take care of animals, there are those diseases. How do we prevent them? So to prevent the introduction and dissemination of animal diseases as far as possible, owners of animals must, among other things, do their best to keep animal diseases out of their businesses. They should ensure adequate hygiene. They should be alert to symptoms of disease, comply with requirements when importing animals from other countries, and lastly, to notify a vet of any suspected animal diseases. Okay, but more on the prevention of animal diseases is detailed on page 120 of your study guide. Okay, so continuing. Okay, we are studying agricultural education 1 so that we can be able to use the knowledge that we acquire here to teach our learners. Okay, so what are the characteristics of a well-managed classroom? So you as a teacher, okay, what is a well-managed classroom? How is that classified? Okay, so a well-managed classroom is one where the teacher and the learners interact in a productive manner, where the learners look up to the teacher for guidance and the teacher does not find it necessary to discipline the learners because they are already well behaved. Okay. However, misbehavior by learners in some classes or lessons does occur in a manner that affects the learner and his or her classmates. Okay. So some of the reasons why learners would misbehave are given below, but you are expected to study all the reasons as outlined on page 127 to 128 of your study guide. See? So some learners misbehave because they are looking for attention. So this is one of the major reasons our students misbehave, because they want our attention, even if the attention is not very positive, they just want to be noticed. Okay, so another reason is rebellion. Another goal for student misbehavior is to demonstrate that students does not and will not follow established conventional school or classroom policies or norms. So he or she feels that they will be regarded as a hero of some sort by their classmates, and this is normally associated with boys. So rebellion is normally associated with boys. Okay, so another reason is psychological or physiological release. So many times learners misbehave as a means of releasing mental, emotional, or physical energy. But once again, you need to read up on all these reasons as outlined on page 127 to 128 of your study guide. Okay, so what are some of the classroom management approaches that we have? So we have, there are 3 primary education behavior modulation approaches that increase suitable student behavior. So this includes positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, as well as shaping. Okay? So with shaping, this is when the teacher reinforces closer and closer to student approximations to the final desired behavior. So gradually, through reinforcement of small bits of approximations of the desired behavior, or shape a student behavior in the direction that is deemed iteratively. Okay, so what are the last topic, which is on the aspects of teaching the topics above to upper primary learners. So we have what we call instructional communication process. So this is outlined in detail on page 138 of your study guide. Okay. Okay, so when it comes to the instructional process now, what is the role of the teacher? So the teacher's role is to direct the instructional communication process with a proper orientation towards content, the instructional strategies, and the students. Okay, so the teacher should have sufficient knowledge of the subject themes, and they also need to like what they are doing, since teaching is more of a calling rather than just a way of making a living. Okay, so we also have what we call cognitive learning, and this is discussed in detail on page 139 of your study guide. So it includes those objectives which deal with the recall or recognition of knowledge and the development of intellectual abilities and skills within our learners. Okay, so you guys do visit page 139 of our study guides and brush up on that. Okay, so this brings us to the end of this brief presentation. So should you have any questions, please reach out to your tutor, which is me, Eric Ukule, during the contact hours that are indicated on slide 2. And on that slide, that is also where you find my contact details, such as cell phone, as well as my email address. So all the best for your upcoming examination, and please do study hard. Go to your study guide, because this is just a brief summary of what is contained with your within your study guide. So you need to, for more details, you need to study from your study guide. Use the assignment as well as this presentation in your preparation for your examinations.